If you are a chess player, it is 100% certain you won't play your whole life from the white side. The issue from the black side is that most players play e5 against e4, which is boring, and most players follow this. But after this video, you will play c5 against e4 in 90% of games. This video is fully based on the Sicilian Defense, the most aggressive chess opening for the black side. The main problem is that most players do not know how to play the Sicilian Defense, or the players who are trying to learn get bored because of the long video length. This video is a complete tutorial for the dragon variation, which is a part of the Sicilian Defense. I cannot cover the Sicilian Defense in one video because it is the most complex topic. This video is for every chess player, but if your rating is lower than 1500, then I have a bonus for you in the last part of the video. Opponents start playing e4, you respond c5, then knight f3. Yes, this is the Sicilian Defense. You play pawn to d6, then white plays pawn to d4. Take the pawn. White takes back. Play knight to f6 attacking on e4 pawn. White plays knight c3 protecting the pawn, then pawn g6. Now the position you are watching on the board is known as dragon variation. Dragon variation is part of open Sicilian, which is part of Sicilian Defense. Here, the dragon variation is divided into many lines, but in this video, I am going to explain to you mainly 3 lines, because these 3 lines are important and more aggressive. Starting with the first line, the Yugoslav Attack, which is the main and most common line of dragon variation, which starts after playing opponent bishop e3. Then you play bishop g7. This bishop is referred to as the head of the dragon, and the attack on this diagonal-like dragon is throwing fire. Then the opponent responds pawn f3. If your opponent is playing pawn to f3, then there is a 99% chance he wants to castle on the queen side, and also protect this pawn, do castle on king side. White plays. Queen d2 wants to attack your king in the future and give some space to the king for the castle. Then black plays knight c6, so the idea behind this move is to give some space to the rook for coming on c8 square, and it will help also in future pawn breaks. Then bishop c4. This is the most important bishop of white because it is attacking on this diagonal and pinning the pawn, and it can break this pawn structure also, which creates a problem for our king. Bishop d7. Queenside castle. White cannot castle on the king side because these pawn structures are very poor as compared to these pawn structures. Then you play rook c8. This rook and this bishop are most important for you because this bishop is controlling alone this diagonal while this rook is alone controlling the c-file, creating a weak area for the king of whites and attacking this bishop also. So bishop b3. Here, it is the end of this opening. I will show you a real game later so that you can understand what to play in the middle game. But before that, let's move to the second line, the classical variation, which again starts with the bishop e3, the black plays bishop g7. Here white plays bishop e2 in the place of pawn f3, because he wants to castle on the king side. You castle, they castle, then knight c6, and then knight b3. Again, bishop of black is controlling the dark diagonal square, and this bishop is blocking this bishop from attacking this square. But this is not as aggressive as the Yugoslav attack, but the third line is more aggressive from the white, the Levin-fish attack, which starts after pawn f4, then knight c6. Do not play bishop g7 and before knight g6. I will explain why, but before that, let's look a game, so that you can understand it better. Because if you don't know what to play in the middle game, then what will make sense to learn this opening? This game is played between 2 chess masters. White has a rating of nearly 2600, while black has a rating of nearly 2500. I am fast-forwarding the game because I already explained this opening earlier. Here white plays pawn h4 before castling, because he wants to attack on king side of black. Black also plays pawn h5, blocking the white's pawn. White takes knight. Bishop takes knight. Well, pawn c6 will be the best move, but anyway. White castle, rook c8. White plays pawn g4. So the idea behind this move is if black takes this pawn, then it will open the path of the h4 pawn, and these pieces will be more aggressive on king side. Then black sacrifice this bishop to capture this bishop. White takes, black takes, white takes, black takes, white takes. Queen d2, then king b1, rook c8, pawn b3, blocking these rooks. Queen e6, attacking this pawn. Pawn takes pawn. Queen takes a pawn and check. And this is a blunder made by white, because rook c3. White cannot capture this rook by pawn, otherwise it will lose his queen, so he plays pawn f7 check, king takes the pawn, then white plays f2 check, king e8, and the next blunder by white again by playing bishop c1. Now black can easily capture this rook. Here white can play any move, but it will lead to checkmate, as I promised in the starting part of the video. If your rating is lower than 1500, then I have a bonus for you. As a low-rated player, you want only one thing from the game, only win. So I have a chess trap for you. But for that, you must play the game from the white side and start the first move with e4, your opponent plays e5. Then knight f3, pawn d6, play pawn d4, pawn takes pawn, knight takes pawn, knight f6, then knight c3 and pawn g6, play pawn to f4. Yes, this is 11 fish attack. Your opponent plays bishop g7. Move your pawn to e5. Pawn takes pawn and pawn takes pawn. Here black has many squares to move his knight, but e4 square and g8 square will not be a good option because no one wants to take back his knight. Let's say black plays knight h5, then bishop b5 check, bishop d7, and now this knight is completely trapped. But most of you thinking, why should I give check first to move this pawn? Suppose you play this pawn early. Then the bishop takes, pawn takes, black can take this knight also, and position will be equal. But let's assume black plays knight g4, again bishop f7 check. White can play bishop or knight here. Let's say they go for bishop. Then the queen takes the knight. Bishop takes knight and knight takes bishop. Here you have one knight extra. But suppose they go for knight c6. Then knight takes knight, pawn takes knight, bishop takes pawn and check. The rook of white is under attack. But one more option, if black goes for king f8, then knight e6, and no one can save his queen here. But suppose black changes his mind and goes for knight d5. Then again bishop b5 check, and white again has three options. But these two options are not as good as the king f8. Simply do castle. Your rook is attacking on f-file, and the king of black cannot castle here. So the last option for black is knight d7, push your pawn. Pawn takes pawn and knight takes pawn. You are forking two pieces of white and one is going to pay for his life. This is a chess trick that you can only play in Sicilian Defense, but if you want more chess tricks, then click on this video and subscribe for more.